What is going on, movie fans, and welcome back to my channel. We are here today to discuss Zack Snyder's new epic space opera by the name of Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. Now the question is this worth pressing play on Netflix? We'll be discussing that and much more in today's review, but first, let's start by you sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Are you a fan of Zack's previous work, and if so, what are your favorite films of his? And as far as this movie goes, what worked, what didn't work, and are you looking forward to seeing his definitive cut of this movie, which we'll talk about later? But also, are you excited for the sequel, and this being the starting point of a new franchise? Do you want to see more? Let me know in the comments below. So let me just say this up top, just in case you're new to the channel, welcome. And for those coming back, I appreciate you all. If you don't know, I am a Zack Snyder fan, whether it's Dawn of the Dead, 300, Watchmen, Man of Steel, BVS, his cut of that film, but also his cut of Justice League. And there's some other movies in his filmography which I think are either okay or they just don't work for me. But nonetheless, when it comes to his collective work, I'm a fan. I like his visual flair. I like his style. Like, he's one of those directors where you know it's a Zack Snyder film. Like, you can't just insert him into a franchise and be like, wait, who directed this? Like, you know it's Zack Snyder, for better or for worse, right? Like, I look at Zack Snyder in a similar light to how I look at someone who I think is a genius filmmaker in their own right, George Miller, right? Like, I feel like Zack Snyder, George Miller, and I'll even throw in like a Ridley Scott, where they sometimes, for better or for worse, they can allow their visual storytelling to tell the narrative more so than like actual story and detail and things of that nature, which we'll get into with this film. But going to Zack Snyder, I think his film language is cool and awesome. How can I make this look cool? How can I make this look awesome? And for the most part, it works for me. Now, bringing it back to Rebel Moon, as I expected, his visual style and his abilities to really have your eye glued to the screen during the big action sequences is just nothing short of amazing. Whether it's his use of slow motion shots, his color palette, Zack's best skills are truly put to work in this movie. And what I also like about Zack is how he puts together his characters, because he always, again, he wants to make this character look cool, no matter if they feel familiar or they have similar tropes you've seen in like archetypes of character. He tries to just wring out as much coolness of a character, especially when it comes to like his female characters. Like, I can't think of a film of his that included male and female, but again, going back to the female, because there's a female lead in this film who we'll talk about with Sofia Boutella. She is great, but all his females are like straight up badasses, right? Like, he's cut from that James Cameron cloth where you have Ripley and you have all his amazing female characters. Like, I like his characters because, again, they're cool. They're cool to look at. They do cool things. And speaking of that, and the characters in this film, Rebel Moon, in an interesting cast, to be honest with you all, which I'll admit, I like their presentation and what they stood for and the idea of them. And as we'll talk a little bit more in depth about later, but the crew of this team made together of Titus and Nemesis and Blood Axe and Kai and Gunner and Tarek. First off, all those names are dope as hell to me. Like, they sound like they're out of a manga or straight out of like a graphic novel. And also, like I said, their visual representation, the way they look, is just straight up badass. But getting to the stars of this movie, the characters that I really liked is starting off with a person who is responsible putting this team together, and that is Cora, played by Sofia Boutella, who's always great in everything I've seen her in. Like, she's always in a supporting role, and she's like a good character actor, but now she has her time to shine, and for me, she doesn't disappoint. I really enjoyed seeing her character, as she is the lead, and she also is known as the Child of Fire in this narrative, as she comes from war and pain, and she changes her path. She wants to fight against the people who made her and are ruling this galaxy with an iron fist and killing those who rebel against them. Sofia is always great in delivering her action moments, but she also gets to show some range in this film, as we get a little bit of her backstory and her showing compassion and leadership to gather the group of warriors to stop the evil from the mother world. But I also enjoyed seeing Ed Skrein, who plays the Admiral Noble. He's a character who is an enforcer. He demonstrates the power of the mother world without hesitation. If you don't fall in line, he's gonna kill you. And those two characters, the Admiral and Korra, when their paths like inevitably clash in this film, they add some pretty entertaining moments when they come across each other. Some final points I want to mention. As I said earlier, the action's on point with Zack Snyder. Very entertaining, very cool. Big fan of the score in this film, as well as being a big fan of science fiction. I really enjoyed being on this space adventure. Really like seeing the different planets and the creatures, and the work and the design, the detail of the different creatures and the mythology and the lore was really interesting, which to that point, I would say the first 45 minutes or so of the world building and setting up the situation was really entertaining and really interesting, as well as I would say the back half, the last 20 to 15 minutes was very entertaining as we have this final standoff with the good guys versus bad guys. There's a twist that I wasn't seeing coming. So those portions of the film really worked for me. But transitioning into my criticisms, now, if you all do not know this film, the whole idea behind this was Zack Snyder said that he pitched to Lucasfilm at, I don't know how long ago, but years ago, he pitched this movie that he wanted to make within the Star Wars universe. And I would imagine now after seeing this film that the meeting probably went a little bit, just to kind of simplify a version of the meeting. Zack pitches his idea to whoever it was running Lucas, whether it was when George Lucas was running the studio or when they sold off to Disney, whoever he talked to on the other side of the table was like, okay, so you want to make a Star Wars film. This is a Star Wars movie. This is just straight up a Star Wars film, ladies and gentlemen. Like, there's a difference between being inspired or paying homage versus just copying the homework. We have Korra, aka Luke Skywalker. She's literally on a planet where we meet her that's literally 1 moon away from being Tatooine. We have rebellious droids. We have a con man pilot, aka Han Solo. The mother world is literally the Empire. Noble is Vader, and there's literally a emperor who's working behind the scenes and has some potential ties to our main character, Korra. Does it sound familiar, ladies and gentlemen? Like, it was just shocking to me how much this film, or I should say, the lack of originality with this movie. Now, to pivot into one of my big issues, I don't know if you all know this, but Zack Snyder himself has come out and said there's a different version. There's his Snyder cut of this film, which is... Now, there's a difference between, like, there's a couple scenes that was missing. There's some things I want to put in there that wasn't in this cut, but I'm going to put it in my cut. He literally said that his cut of the film is a completely different movie.
Oh, but there is a definitive one that I think that's the one. I think that the director's cut of Rebel Moon is an alternative reality version. It's not an extended cut of this movie. It's almost like a different movie.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man? I'm out, man. That nigga's tripping.
I get that he does director's cuts, but I can't see any upside of this rollout of a lesser version of this movie. The only thing I can see this being a benefit is literally for Netflix saying, hey, this is how we can keep subscribers, this is how we can gain subscribers, building that Zack Snyder cut hype and putting it over to our platform. That's the only benefit of putting the diet version of this film out first. To me, it's just completely unnecessary. It's either you drop both versions at one time with it being a streaming platform, like this is supposed to be the PG-13, like this isn't, I know it was like a limited theatrical run, but this is streaming. Streaming is a different type of, system and rating than it is in the theaters. So it's just drop them at once or just drop the better version. Like, it is baffling to me how they rolled out this movie. Speaking of, it is clear as day that this version is edited down to the point that the characters' motives and their backstories are missing or extremely flawed, to scenes feeling incomplete or lacking context, to the characters just feeling like paper copies of characters you've seen before. Like, these characters in the film, again, they look cool, I like the actors, but they reminded me of like arcades where like they look cool, you see a trailer or whatnot, but then when you put in your money, you get to play, you get to bring the characters to life. And again, these are just like paper cutouts of characters you've seen 1,000 times. And like I said, it starts off strong and it finishes with an entertaining finale, but the middle portion of this movie felt like a video game scene cutout where we're seeing and meeting different characters who are just willing to sacrifice their life for a small village that they don't even know is real, and they just do the same song and dance with each new character. Like, I'm not joking, you all. When you see this film, if you do see it, when we meet this gang, again, I like these actors. These characters look cool, and I like the idea behind them. But again, it's lacking depth. But when we meet each character, it became laughable because it would do the same song and dance. It was so repetitive in the second half where you would meet a character, they'll do something cool, they'll say something cool. The other recruits who we just picked up, from the previous scene, they're like, oh, they're looking back. They're shocked by what they're doing or how they're able to defeat this creature or whatnot. It was the same thing over and over again. Look, Zach, this one ain't it. Netflix, this one is not the one in my opinion. Bad call to put this one out as a tease or as a appetizer before the real meal, or even the first of a sequel and apparently a launching pad to this whole universe that's going to be compiled of spin-offs and shows and comics. Look, I don't think this is the worst movie of the year or Zack Snyder's worst film, but the dialogue was wooden. There's so much repetitiveness going on, the lack of originality, you've seen this before, and this less than cut just didn't work for me. So before I give you all my overall thoughts, my final comments on this film, give you my score, if you stuck around to this point of the video, I just want to take this moment to thank you all. I really appreciate the support. If you haven't already, consider liking this video, sharing your thoughts in the comments, as well as sharing this video, and also consider subscribing to the channel. Overall, Rebel Moon's failure to meet its potential is a shame, as it appeared that Zack Snyder copied the answers from George Lucas's tests. The lack of originality of the story and the characters was shocking to me, considering that it comes from such a creative mind like Zack Snyder. The movie rehashes what several sci-fi classics have already done, but without any better results. As you would expect, the majority of the visual effects and the action sequences were excellent, and the setup of the first 45 minutes of the world building and the setup of the situation and even the conclusion are excellent, but that middle portion is just tedious and uninteresting. This to me was a mediocre at best beginning of this universe, with the characters missing backstory and personality, and the narrative seem incomplete, but I expect history to repeat itself, with the director's cut being the more superior version and offering a more satisfying experience. I'm going to give Rebel Moon Part 1 a 2.5 out of 5. Now look, like I said up top, I'm a Zack Snyder fan, so I will be watching his cut of this first film, and I'll also keep an eye out for the sequel. Fingers crossed that Part 2 will be the actual cut of the film, but like I said, this version of the film, this diet version, this lesser than version, just wasn't for me. But hey, that's my thoughts. Go ahead and start to share yours in the comments below. What worked? What didn't work? Are you excited for the director's cut? Are you excited for the sequel? Are you excited for the more spin-offs, all the stuff that they have planned for this universe? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you all for watching today's review. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're staying safe. You all are awesome. If you had a good time, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out my other reviews I've done so far this year. Check out my most recent review, and I'll catch you all on the next video. Thank you.